As a platinum sponsor, Tonkin and Taylor is proud to be part of the community dedicated to shaping the future of the nation's infrastructure. Our company's purpose is, together we create and sustain a better world. And as we have been doing this for over 65 years, with excellence and innovation in infrastructure. We understand that our actions today shape the world of tomorrow, and we are committed to providing sustainable, environmental and engineered solutions that lead the way towards a greener and more resilient future. Major challenges lay ahead in the infrastructure space, be it economic, climate or inherited. It'll be through the mahi-tahi collaboration that we are able to achieve the infrastructure outcomes we all need. Now, I'd like to draw our attention to our speaker, someone whose leadership has transformed the infrastructure landscape in Australia. It is a great pleasure that I introduce Peter Tompkins, the CEO of Downer Group, our keynote speaker this afternoon. Based in Sydney, Peter is an influential thought leader in the infrastructure space, and his sound understanding of the challenges and opportunities in the infrastructure space has propelled Downer Group to new heights and success and enhanced the quality of life for many. We hope that Peter's insights into the New Zealand and Australian markets, potential solutions on challenges around resource scarcity, and the use of collaboration to facilitate sustainability will help turn our infrastructure ambitions into action. So please join me to give a warm welcome to Downer Group CEO, Peter Tompkins. Thank you.
Thank you. Kia ora. Thank you very much to Grant for reading those kind words, exactly how I put them out for him. Look, thank you also to the team at Tonkin and Taylor for the opportunity to speak today. As Grant mentioned, I am the recently appointed CEO of Downer, and being invited to this important gathering of leaders is an honour. Downer was founded in 1933 by Arnold Downer, a talented and, from what I can tell, a very impatient public works engineer in Wellington, who studied at the Whanganui Technical College. Since listing on the New Zealand Stock Exchange, Downer has acquired many complementary and iconic businesses like Hawkins. Today, across Australia and New Zealand, we employ 33,000 people, and our reason for being, or our purpose, is enabling communities to thrive. Now, when I think about this purpose and the strategy that underpins our business, I believe that enabling communities to thrive is as relevant today as it was for Arnold Downer in his era. Companies that were pioneers with visions that shaped in a very profound way the solving of infrastructure challenges of both nations, but incredibly through the industrial age, depression and war times. One only needs to read about the challenges and opportunities that we face today as a Trans-Tasman community. The megatrends of global warming, energy transition, urbanisation, national security and population growth. And this is with the backdrop of very high government debt because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, this means there has never been such plentiful and sometimes misleading, but certainly very equally balanced for the glass half empty and glass half full pundits. Now, being here today, I have to tell you that I am a 100% glass half full guy. And that is what motivates me in leading an organisation like Downer. I say it because of our ability as a community to come good when it matters, and the track record that we collectively have to innovate, improvise and adapt in the face of challenges with real passion and real purpose. That is what Downer did with their industry peers back then, in lockstep with governments to solve the standard of living and national security challenges facing their communities. Back then, progress was measured a little differently. Outcomes were determined through precision engineering, structure, detail, innovation, and a drive to create a better future. One of the serious challenges that we face right now is that progress is sometimes measured a little differently. Some measure it through likes on social media, and this is often at the expense of politicians having the confidence to adopt long-term perspectives and advocate to their electorates the detail and sometimes less popular views of what is needed beyond a single political cycle. What are the opportunity costs and what are the trade-offs we need to make? Because decisions in infrastructure can be very challenging. We are entering a period in our history that will be as profound as the industrialisation era. After decades of low interest rates that have enabled scarce capital to find its way into suboptimal places, and the forced intervention of central governments to correct market failures, like during the GFC, and then to protect against the catastrophic failure during the COVID-19 pandemic, we are facing a period of uncertainty where the predictions of you and I are just as legitimate and probably more accurate than those of some economic and political scholars. Against this backdrop, though, we must learn how to minimise the effects of global warming on living standards and rapidly find the technology to support our transition. This requires a sense of purpose and equity between industry and government. The role of the people in this audience is to deliver critical infrastructure for the communities of today in metropolitan and critically the regional areas, whilst making planning decisions that will lessen the burden on future generations. And I'm talking specifically about the responsibility to eat into the infrastructure deficit, but also the responsibility that we have to ensure that our infrastructure is resilient and capable of withstanding the climate impacts that are very real. One only needs to look at the devastation of Cyclone Gabrielle that claimed 11 lives and destroyed essential infrastructure across the east coast of the North Island, Auckland and the Coromandel, or the bushfires and then floods that ravaged the east coast of Australia between 2020 and 2022. To put the enormity of this into perspective, with an example that may resonate particularly well for the engineering, legal and commercial fraternity here, in 2021 there was a snowstorm that occurred in Texas for the first time since records commenced. This extreme and ongoing weather event caused nearly half of Texas's installed wind power generation to be offline because the turbines had frozen. The occurrence of this event required the developer of the wind farm to buy electricity from coal power generators to honour their commitments at 2,000% of the renewable power priced in their financial model. And as you can imagine, this created somewhat of a legal dispute. The developer arguing force majeure relief because of the provisions in their contract and said therefore they weren't responsible. The court, however, did not agree, finding that the cause of the issue was climate induced and therefore foreseeable. Now, while this legal battle is still unfolding, it points to an important principle. What we assume in relation to the location of our infrastructure, its capacity and the assumptions that we make about its availability and reliability must always be questioned. The resilience work that must now be considered in relation to the work being done to restore East Coast community infrastructure must now also be considered in relation to all of our decision making, both for the maintenance of existing assets and our greenfield projects which are coming. In my mind, to put it quite simply, the intellect and the way of working that we have in the prescription of standards and planning laws and that chronic unease in relation to seismic resilience must be applied with a lot more seriousness in the equivalent space for horizontal infrastructure approvals, the design resilience and the ability to adapt and withstand global warming. So to bring this into a problem statement, both New Zealand and Australia actually face the same social and economic challenges in building the necessary infrastructure because of funding gaps, challenges in economic conditions, and of course supply chain constraints and other issues that I'll talk about in a moment. What I'm not going to do today, though, is to attempt to provide solutions to the sources of funding for the infrastructure, but instead focus on how we can maximise the planning and delivery as many of the projects within whatever the funding envelope might be, in order to drive economic expansion and to minimise the opportunity cost and decision making that means we can't get everything done. And this will of course enable living standards to increase. I'm passionate about the growing government and industry alignment and the genuine partnering that encourages real innovation that I'm seeing. The sustainability objectives that we're all talking about and the inclusivity targets that I think are now becoming more than just reporting. If we can continue to do these things, then I do believe we can get ourselves to the starting line of what will be the Olympic marathon of delivering resilient infrastructure and whole-of-life solutions that will serve future generations. But this will only be the starting line. I'm passionate about all of these things, and I know many of the people in this audience today are as well. Bridging the gap is both an opportunity and a collective responsibility. So the infrastructure gap, or depending on your perspective, the opportunity to close the gap. New Zealand's public infrastructure deficit is around $105 billion, give or take. The government's investment of $62 billion in this year's budget over the next 5 years will certainly help addressing the shortfall. But what is certain is that as we start to dig into this deficit and as we invest more, the quantum of the deficit will only continue to increase. On one view, we will never catch it. In Australia, it's a similar story, with $237 billion needed to spend in the next few years. This figure doesn't take into account the cost of transitioning to renewable energy, which is not yet understood. Some of you will know the Snowy Hydro project, and the business case shortfall with the delays is just an example of infrastructure in renewables being very problematic. Now, in the New Zealand context, the starting position with a very rich renewable energy base powered by hydro and other green sources, I believe is a genuine global advantage. Now, the scarcity of labour, or depending on your perspective, the opportunity to develop a new generation of talent and create prosperity. Funding is one of the challenges, but even with the funding that we have available, there is still a chronic shortage of skilled labour to deliver existing work with confidence. Whilst immigration settings are usually called out as the lever to solve these problems, we can't rely on this alone. Now, if anyone can name a country that doesn't suffer from the same skilled labour shortages as we do right now, then we should all go over there with our recruiters and hire as many people as possible. The real answer, and the one that takes 5 to 10 years to incubate and get real benefit, is training and developing our own. Over the past few years, the infrastructure sectors on both sides of the ditch have faced the same significant challenges relating to increasing the workforce diversity, attracting talent, and the competitive nature of our markets, and recognising and accelerating the value of gender balance, the different cultures and the generational talents which we all strive to bring into our organisations. One successful initiative that we've undertaken at Downer, and I know many of you will have your own similar ones, is our what is now our Trans-Tasman business program called Own Different. This was launched to drive inclusion and diversity, and while there's still lots of progress to be made in the sector through many similar initiatives, I think we are starting to see the benefits. Strong leadership plays a crucial role in initiating change by questioning the status quo and seeking and pushing ways to improve. The cultural transformation that is taking place, I believe, has its foundation in very strong government policy and leadership. This transformation has been driven by a strategic focus on ensuring inclusion and equitable opportunities and creating a culture that embraces and celebrates differences. At Downer, 24% of our workforce recognise themselves as Maori. Since 2014, we have developed 11 Maori development and leadership initiatives, and the integration of Maori protocols and practices is now an everyday part of our business. We collaborate with the Ministry of Social Development and the Department of Corrections to support training, employment and pastoral care. Extending partnerships through the supply chain and the leaders in this room through government, head contractor, consultancies, we have the ability to ensure that supply chain and all of our delivery partners work collectively with the same objectives. To address the industry's skills and labour shortage, partnerships and relationships are definitely crucial, and they will enable our communities to thrive. On the labour supply side, the point is there is no silver bullet. It will be hundreds of individual initiatives specifically formulated and targeted to the right audiences in the right geographies as a collective industry endeavour. Now, slow approval processes, or depending on your perspective, the opportunities to make decisions assessed against a detailed master plan. Similar to Australia, New Zealand is facing environmental pressures, and the reform of the country's resource management system provides an opportunity to protect the natural environment as well as advancing social, economic and cultural outcomes. At the moment in both countries, some bureaucratic processes are not achieving their intended purpose. Social media, micro-interest lobby groups and the war chests that are often deployed by industry all achieve their objectives of overwhelming the process owners within government agencies. So what's the solution? Well, it is really a tough one because I know there is lots of work being done and things are getting better, but we need to be impatient for change. To improve the efficiencies of resource management and to get timely decisions, better collaboration amongst regulatory bodies, proponents and communities, we need to really put our effort into master planning that has a genuine consultative edge and that prescribes the focus areas for development well ahead of time, and importantly has a high level of transparency with a balanced scorecard that everybody knows and that it will enable groups to assess suitability and impact at the pre-inception stage. The master planning approach that takes this through cycle national approach that I was referring to earlier also enables industry to plan resources around a more certain pipeline, because at the moment, frustratingly, one of the biggest challenges in both countries is that notwithstanding the huge pipeline, we are all at risk of losing the talent that is delivering the current wave of work because we don't have exact certainty on the next horizon of work to commence. So better collaboration and achieving better outcomes. There have been many discussions today about the growing complexity of infrastructure. Now, what I've witnessed in New Zealand is particularly strong in collaborative contracting, and I think provides the benchmark for Australian state governments. The depth of capability in alliancing across capital and maintenance contracts across all sectors is something to be proud of. You don't have to look too far to see the value add arising from the alliance model and the way it enables innovation and risk sharing. The Milford Road Alliance, led by the Wakatawi, is a great example of what can be achieved. Employing this model meant a large workforce was mobilised at pace on a scale that's never been seen in that area before, and importantly, drove real value for money outcomes. Working as a team from the outset brought constructability to design and allowed value engineering to bring real benefits across a large number of concurrent projects. The East Coast Alliance also presents such an opportunity. The type of delivery structure is well suited to complex environments where social and economic outcomes for communities are intertwined and just as important as the work itself. Now, to the contrary, in some PPP models for capital works, innovation sometimes is inhibited and opportunities for better engineering sometimes can be lost because of the specifications and abatements that can lead to gold plating, a cost ultimately borne by the taxpayer. Overlay this with the distance that can sit between the client on the state side the D&C contractors and the designers, and the integrity of having that relationship so that needs can be understood and solutions appropriately created, it can sometimes have a negative impact. Now, look, there will always be a place for PPPs, but my perspective is that we've got to be able to sandpaper off some of the hard edges which currently exist in the model to better support collaboration and ensure that we bring the customer, the designers and the constructors together faster with a higher level of trust and without the unnecessary interplay of equity and finance structures. In New Zealand, we're also seeing a really good use of early contractor involvement, which brings even greater cost certainty and transparency. Constructability input, with this theme enables better sequencing of works, which contributes to both time and cost advantages. And there are many examples of these models working effectively in the market. So a few final comments on sustainability. Arguably, one of the biggest shifts the industry has seen in both countries is how infrastructure will support decarbonisation in the economy. Most organisations represented in this room have made climate commitments that align with greenhouse gas reduction targets set by government. But we also have additional and unique skill sets, collective expertise and experience to help each other's journeys towards achieving our net zero commitments. Whether that be through ambient temperature recycled asphalts for our roads, construction techniques that support Green Star building ratings, electrification, green materials, industry and government are doing some heavy lifting together in the innovation space. For Downer, we are actively engaged in driving sustainable change in the energy and industrial sectors. Our goal is to assist our customers in becoming more to the evolving market dynamics. We recognise that decarbonisation in industries is a complex process and encompassing various approaches requires emission reductions, efficiency enhancements, renewable energy adoption, and exploring innovative green technologies and emerging technologies like hydrogen. We've got some involvement in the Australian hydrogen projects and other new sources of power. And at the moment, we're delivering a carbon capture project for one of our key customers, Santos. We collaborate closely with the National Hydrogen Skills Working Group and universities in both Australia and New Zealand, and we're looking to shape the future skills and qualifications framework for the emerging hydrogen industry. By fostering collaboration between industry associations, government, financial institutions, New Zealand and Australia are really starting to develop initiatives such as green financing programs that create tax incentives, value for money, and ensuring that capital finds its most suitable home, and certifications that recognise and promote sustainable business operations in our sector. Now, this will only accelerate. New Zealand and Australia share a resolute ambition for a sustainable and resilient future. But ambition alone is not sufficient. It must be transformed into tangible action through collaborative endeavours, innovative approaches, and unwavering dedication to turning ideas into reality. Confronted with the idea of scarcity of resources, collaboration emerges as the key to achieving sustainable infrastructure development. Furthermore, by prioritising sustainability, equity and inclusion, infrastructure projects hold the potential to strongly empower our Maori, Pacific Island and First Nation people, while chartering a greener path to progress. By joining forces and bridging the gap, we can amplify the positive impact and foster communities that thrive. It's critical to recognise the visibility and stability of the project pipeline as well, so that we can all coordinate it and plan for the years ahead. Now is the time for all stakeholders to unite their efforts and collectively shape the future we envision. We must harness the strength of collaboration to overcome challenges, improve productivity and create a future that leaves a lasting positive impact on both our environment and our communities. I believe there are many signs that we are building momentum in each of these very important areas. It's now time to accelerate them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. A few questions from the floor here that I'll try and burn through. First of all, how can we collaborate to address decarbonisation in infrastructure as well? What lessons are there from Australia?
Look, I think it starts with that selection of the right projects, and that idea of having scarce resources, a big Chinese menu of things that need to be done, and they've got to stand on their own 2 feet. So I think very much around project selection, that is where we can really harness the opportunity to collaborate and get going on that decarbonisation journey. The thing I would say though is in Australia we've got it a little tougher because we still don't have the answers we need for our green power generation.
Renewable energy.
Renewable energy is where a lot of our time is being spent at the moment. And I said before that in New Zealand that isn't the same problem as we have in Australia, and I think that is something that provides an incredible opportunity.
Can you give us a bit of a comparison between Australia's experience with an infrastructure pipeline and New Zealand's experience at the moment, and what it means for certainty within the sector?
Look, they're exactly the same. The issue is there's a significant gap. Government sometimes, don't see through that political cycle, so we see the stopping and starting, which ultimately doesn't deliver the outcomes we need and the ones that we needed yesterday. I think there's a lot in that space. What I mentioned before, the opportunity to be faster in planning approvals and provide that certainty. These are, all of the things that will incrementally allow us to chew into that deficit.
Are there challenges with the alliance model? Are there lessons that you've taken from that?
Yeah, look, I think what you can never ever underestimate and put enough effort into is this idea of trust. And what we all have to collectively understand is that we are working to solve the same problems, and even a project that doesn't have the right credentials, even if it's wrapped around an alliance model, may still not be successful.
A question that's come in via Slido. Thanks for your talk, Peter. What is the first step, or perhaps the first couple of steps we should take towards sandpapering off the rough edges when it comes to PPPs?
Oh gosh, okay. I'm going to say I don't have the answer to that. I think they have got better. I'm not a doomsdayer about them, and say it depends on the infrastructure. I think what you really need to have is an equity box that is properly resourced, and that it plays that really important role in bringing together the client, the stakeholder groups, and the delivery partners, because ultimately you've got to make sure that the customer, the infrastructure owners and decision makers are in lockstep with the people that are providing the thought leadership from industry. And that's the area I think now where we don't quite get it right.
I wondered too if you had some more thoughts on trying to develop a domestic workforce. Obviously, Australia's been experiencing similar labour shortages to New Zealand, but the truth is if we really invest in domestic talent now, and we wait 7 or 10 years until that talent actually hits industry, that's exactly the same point as which our population is ageing, and we have a significant drop-off in the working age population.
Yeah, look, it's not easy. I think though that the investment that we made in this area, at least 5 years ago, is now starting to come through as well. So it's not a cold start. And I think there are still parts of our community that aren't participating fully with the skills that they can develop. And some of these skills can be developed faster than 5 years. But overall, I think we have to be realistic and say, well, we've got to do everything we can now. We've planted some seeds before. We rely on attracting overseas talent, and all of these incremental, focus areas will help.
Well, it's great to have you here. Thank you for travelling for us. Good luck in the job. Won't you join me in thanking Peter Tompkins?
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Over here.